Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Today is Dragon Age Day, and consequently, Bioware has dropped a ton of information regarding Veilguard. They've done a couple of major interviews. They didn't ask me anything on Reddit earlier, and they've dropped an infographic covering a lot of the major decisions you've been able to make throughout the game. So, first and foremost, I want to warn you that this video will contain spoilers. Right, so if you intend to play the game and haven't played it yet, or you're worried about story spoilers, you definitely want to go ahead and skip this. In this video, we're only going to focus on the infographic, but of course, I will drop other content that will cover the information dropped today. And I know that David Gator did a series walking through all of the party members that he worked on for Dragon Age. I'm going to do a video on that as well. I think a lot of interesting information came out of that. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the video. So this is on Bioware's Dragon Age page on Twitter. Starts with your story. It's going to walk through all of your story decisions, and the first one will be, who did you romance? And number one is Nev, and that is the person who I romanced as well. I'm not really surprised by this. I feel like she is the most attractive of all of the female presenting characters. And then Lucanus is number two. Neither one of those surprised me. What does shock me is that Emmerich is in last place. I guess, considering the information we had before the game came out, that shouldn't be all that shocking. But now, from everything that I've heard, he is actually the best romance in the entire game. And even worse, from everything I've heard, Davrin is number two. So the two best romances are the ones that people romance the least. Again, I went through with Nev. Honestly, I found it to be boring, and the romance was not good at all. And that's what I've heard about most of these other characters, that the romances are really nothing to write home about, except for Tosh, who certainly has some interesting scenes. I experienced one where they courted me and were growling over me. That was fascinating to say the least. So at least it won't be boring. But yeah, I've heard really these five are none to write home about, and these two are the ones you really want to get into if you end up playing the game. Next up, the ending of Balara's party member quest. What did you do with the Archine Spirit? I also chose to keep the Archine Spirit. I don't feel like the game does a good job of really setting you up for that decision and giving you enough information to feel one way or another about it, but I just felt like, hey, she's a veil jumper. She's all about finding this type of technology and preserving it, so it makes more sense to just go ahead and keep it. This was amazing. Did Emmerich become a lich or save Manfred? I feel like this was like top three choices in the game. Completely came out of left field. I didn't think I was going to have to choose between these two. I decided to let him become a lich. It felt the most true to Emmerich's character. Never regretted it. Having a good aligned lich next to me with skull face and all was amazing. It was amazing. I loved it. I thought Bioware handled his whole arc so well. Frankly, I think Emmerich stacks up very well against all party members in the Dragon Age series, which I don't really feel that way about most of the people here. Davrin and Emmerich, but Emmerich stands up because of the content he has. I think Davrin stands up because of how important Grey Wardens are in the overall series. This is definitely something we'll talk about more when I rank all of the party members across all four games. Next up, what did Davrin decide to do with the Griffins? Now, apparently 67% of you chose to send them to Arlathan, which basically makes the Griffins into Wardens of Nature, while only 33% chose to send them to the Grey Wardens. Now, my understanding is the disadvantage of sending them to Arlathan is that they don't show up to help during the final missions. You don't really see them at all, whereas if they're aligned with the Grey Wardens, you see them as part of the final battle. I chose to send the Griffins to the Grey Wardens, and honestly, I regretted it. I feel like I should have sent them to Arlathan because Veilguard feels like the end of the Grey Wardens. It feels like that chapter is closed, and it just makes more sense that the Griffins would be able to live on as regular creatures independent of the Grey Wardens. It feels a little off having them connected to an organization that's essentially about to die out when the Griffins just came back. So one of the few things I definitely regret about my Veilguard playthrough. How did Lucanus deal with Ilario? 78% of you sent him to jail. 22% chose to forgive. My understanding is you get a forgiveness option if you saved his city instead of Minrathous. I didn't do that, so jail was the only option I had available to me. But just all the way around, I found Lucanus's arc to be kind of underwhelming, to be honest with you. I saw Ilario betraying him a mile away, so even though I really like his voice and his look, and I like the concept of having an Antivan Crow on our team, especially after Zevran, I didn't like what was done with his overall storyline, so this choice didn't really hit for me. Which culture did Tosh embrace? 79% of you chose Ravani, and then 21% chose Kunari. This is another choice that I feel like the game does a poor job of setting up. I mentioned in my review, I feel like this is not the core issue that Tosh is dealing with. So when it pops up, it's like, wait a minute, what? This isn't the choice I should be making. And the game kind of presents it like you can only be of one culture, which I think is fundamentally wrong and off. Like, you can be of two cultures and take whatever it is that you like or need from both, and it's perfectly okay. You can't control who your parents are. You can't control what environment you grew up in. So the idea that, well, you have to either be Kunari or either be Ravani doesn't really make sense for Tosh. But that's what they put forth, and it makes sense to me that most people will choose Ravani. Kunari are not represented well in Veilguard. So when you look at it, you're like, why would anybody want to join these people? Next up on the list, who did Nev become to Docktown? This is very interesting to me. 61% of people chose a protector, 39% chose an inspiration. I chose an inspiration because I felt like the way a protector was presented was basically going to harden Nev and make her someone more willing to do very vicious things, work with criminals, things of that nature, whereas an inspiration felt much more true to her character. And it's interesting to see that so many people disagreed. And so I wonder what is different when you choose this option and whether or not it significantly changes how Nev ends up. I believe in my playthrough, she basically ended up opening a detective agency with the Templar that she was associated with the entire game. I wonder if she does something completely different if she ends up being a protector instead. What Titan emotion did Harden embrace? To me, it was obvious. You're going to choose calm. Who knows what kind of impact taking anger might have had on Harding. So again, I'm very curious about what the alternative looks like. I really enjoyed Harding's quest line from a visual standpoint. I felt like some of the areas that we walked through and some of the areas where the final boss battle was contained looked really, really freaking cool. Seeing that heart dangling from the ceiling was amazing, but I didn't feel like from a storyline standpoint that it was done well. And this choice, again, it just didn't hit for me the way I felt like it could have. But seems like most of the people sided with the way I felt about it anyway. All right, next up, the fate of Demeter's Crossing Mayor. 22% of you banished him to the Grey Wardens, 36% saved, and then 42% left him to die. By far, the best decision is to banish him to the Grey Wardens because that choice, believe it or not, it has some of the most reactivity you get for a choice in the entire game. Banishing him to the Grey Wardens causes him to come up multiple times. I really, really felt satisfied by being able to do this. And it's kind of odd to me. I feel like a Grey Warden being able to do this, there's no other decision like it for other factions. Like, there's nothing, as far as I know, for like Moonwatch or the soldiers of the Lords of Fortune, where there's a choice and where there's a decision to be made, and only they have a special option, and that special option they can choose has reactivity throughout your adventure. So just it kind of just reinforces Grey Warden feels like the canon choice for Veilguard for sure. Which city did you help save? A small majority of people saved Treviso, 51%, whereas 49% went with Minrathous. I also did Minrathous, which kind of ended up being a boneheaded choice. I went with Minrathous because I was really excited about being able to travel into Tevinter and learn more about Tevinter, and so I was hoping by saving this city I would get more of that type of content. But I was playing as a dual-wielding rogue, which meant a lot of my best equipment was really in Treviso, and there was a bunch of content here I missed. So consequently, I didn't get everything that I probably should have. But at the end of the day, I didn't regret it. I wanted to see more Tevinter, and I got to see everything that at least the game provides. So I can't complain about that. Next up, dealing with the first warden. To me, there was no decision there. You absolutely had to punch that man's lights out. But I found it super cool that there's actually some reactivity based on whether or not you punch or reason with him. And it does kind of feel like this decision matters. There are some things that you miss out on if you decide to punch him. And I thought that was really cool. I like how they handled this decision, even though he's a little bit more cartoonishly annoying than I feel like actually makes sense in the game. I like the way the reactivity is handled for this particular choice. Isle of Gods, Distraction Team Leader. So this is the end game where you're trying to figure out, okay, who's going to handle certain tasks. And most people chose Harding. I chose Davrin. No question in my mind, Davrin is the right decision. Davrin is the canon choice. Even though it guarantees he's going to die, I feel like Davrin is meant to die. I feel like Davrin dying is synonymous with the end of the Grey Wardens. This is it. The blight, the major last blight has occurred. The Grey Wardens put their lives on the line to save everybody. And when Davrin falls into that abyss, that's pretty much it. The Grey Wardens are officially never going to be again. I feel like it's just an absolutely perfect ending for him. And this aspect of his line is why I put him up so much higher. We're definitely going to talk about that when we compare all of the party members. I think Davrin ranks very high in the overall list of Dragon Age party members, not so much because of his content in the game, but because of how his final sacrifice fits in the overall arc of Grey Wardens within the Dragon Age universe. Isle of Gods wards shut down. Did you choose Balara or Nev? Now, I chose Balara, and I didn't regret that choice. But what I've heard repeatedly is that it's actually really cool if you choose the person that you're romancing, because you're going to get unique dialogue with that particular individual. So potentially, I might have really enjoyed choosing Nev as that character and then getting the dialogue with a blighted Nev who doesn't know if she's going to recover. I might go through this section again and do that just to see what it's like. Next up, top 3 companions chosen to unravel the wards with the Veil Jumpers. I'm pretty sure I chose Harding because you could do it in one of two ways. Either you can choose someone who will help them unravel it, or you could choose someone who will help protect them while it's being unraveled. I had both Emmerich and Nev on my team, and I already mentioned Balara was doing something else, so I chose Harding, and that still worked out just fine. Interesting to see that Emmerich is the #1 choice, though. It would seem that Balara would be the one that you really wanted in that slot, but okay. Top 3 companions chosen to go after the Venatori Commander with the Crows. No question. We all know who should be in there. Lucanus is your #1 choice. Odd to me that Tosh would be #2. That's not a role that I would have chosen for them at all. I probably would have given it to Nev instead to go after Venatori, but it is what it is. No question, Lucanus is who you want. Then next up, top 3 companions to fight the Juggernaut at the gate with the Grey Wardens and Mornwatch. Obviously, Tosh and Davin should be number 1 and number 2. Not sure why Emmerich makes sense at number 3, but I chose Tosh and I had no issues with that. Top 3 companions chosen to stay behind for the counterattack. Once again, I chose Tosh. I felt like they made absolutely the most sense. And to be honest with you, these 2 and number 3, that's who I would have chosen as well. So in this standpoint, I'm pretty much in line with the overall community. And I just want to say, I feel like this whole ending section that has strong shades of the Suicide Mission and Mass Effect 2, I love it. I love it. I think they did a great job. I love how you have to figure out the best ways to utilize your squad and deal with the issues that you're confronted with. I think it really, really works well. I've seen some commentary saying that people feel like it just bites off Mass Effect 2 and that it's not special. That's crazy talk. This is amazing. It is amazing. The ending, there are lots of issues with Veilguard. The ending is not one of them. Most of the best content in the game comes in the end, from a cinematic, writing, just every standpoint, even the music, every standpoint you could think of, the ending absolutely works. They nailed it, and I'm really happy about that. All right, so now moving on to the very, very end. First and foremost, confronting Solas. The vast majority of us chose to redeem Solas, and to me, it just reinforces Solas was right. Solas was right. Everybody knew he was right. And so instead of trying to outsmart him or fight him or do something that would go against him, they just decided to redeem him because they're like, you know, in the end of the day, we know you're right. We know what is happening to the elves really isn't right. And we really should go ahead and pull down this veil and allow the elves to go back to the way things used to be. We can't quite do that, but we don't want to mess you over in the process. So here you go. We're going to help you help us. All right. I'm all good with it. I wish there were more layers to how you deal with Solas. But at the end of the day, for the couple of choices that you do have, I feel like they were handled very, very well. Then next up, if you redeem Solas, what percentage of you either caused him to be left alone in the Fade or allow the Inquisitor to join him so that he would not be alone? The majority of you left him in the Fade alone, but I feel like a lot of that is probably people importing Inquisitors who did not romance Solas, and so consequently sending the Inquisitor with him wouldn't really be an option. Or you might have chosen dialogue options that were very upset regarding his treatment of Varric and basically telling the Inquisitor things that would cause her to have a negative perspective on him, which also might impact her willingness to enter into the Fade with him. So at the end of the day, I have the Inquisitor join Solas. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was a beautiful, amazing ending. And if we get a Dragon Age 5, I would love to see a scene where we glimpse into the Fade and see Solas and the Inquisitor having tea together or enjoying each other's company while at the same time still stuck in that prison to keep up the veil. Next up, what percentage of players played rock, paper, scissors with Manfred? I am shocked that only 31% of people did this. Now, mind you, in order to find Manfred, you have to go kind of in an area of the Lighthouse that you don't really have to go to. Otherwise, there are no quests there. There's nothing that has to be done there. And so I guess on some level it makes sense, but I was the type of player who every time I came back to the Lighthouse, I was looking around, all right, what conversations can I get into? And a lot of times there would be people perched in that same area. So you would walk right past Manfred, and it'd be weird to just walk right past him and not at least attempt to say hello. But basically, if you clicked on him, you could then play rock, paper, scissors with him. For whatever reason, the first time I did this, it was the same animation each time. I kept losing. I kept winning. I would use paper and he would use rock. But when I tried to do it the next time, then the animation started switching up and we were going back and forth. Cool little detail regardless. And then what percentage of players petted Hassan? Again, I'm shocked it's only 50% of people. How do you walk past Hassan and not pet him? What kind of psychopaths are y'all? Come on now. Come on now. Hassan needs some love. He needs some affection. He needs some reinforcement, positive reinforcement. You all know you should have been giving it to him. Come on now. But that's it. That is the full infographic of all the different decisions that we made in Veilguard. You all already know I love this kind of stuff. I think it's really cool information. I hope every developer who comes out with this type of RPG releases this information and lets people know, hey, how many people really do side with me? How many people think the way that I do? I think it's very, very interesting to find out how different we all are as players and how wide and vast the different tastes are that we have. Anyway, that's the video. Hope all of you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.